least we always try. All right. So today I had to actually change the deck title. First official November one, November profiling call. And I think we have a number of topics on the agenda that we probably won't get completely into, but some of them are carryovers from conversations that we've been floating through the governance channels as well. So I'm going to walk through these very quickly with you folks, and then you let me know if there are other things that you would want to prioritize for topics for today. So one that's a carryover that's bopped back and forth between our profiling and our governance call recently is making a modification to the way that we are doing sub-value sets. So essentially like a pass-through artifact that allows for validation tooling to locate the value set and for people to locate the value set that you're referring to when there isn't necessarily like a link that you can easily click online. We've been evaluating, I think, a number of different options we have for improvements in this space, and testing them through the profiling stream in weeks past, feels like years past. And we brought it to governance last week to see if they wanted to, like anybody wanted to form a motion around it. And there was some desire to kind of still talk through a little bit of the impacts and a little bit of some of the modeling choices that are still available to us within the approach that seems promising. So I've got that one up as like a first topic in our hopes that maybe we can get to a decision today if we want to incorporate the change. The second one, this one is actually a little bit related to prep for not just our 1.2 release, but primarily our 2.0 release, which is we've got some pages in the guide that specifically talk about the maturity level of some of our profiles. And while we continue to like refine the profiles through the profiling call and through our community issue log, I think one thing that we've maybe not done a great job at is like keeping an up-to-date assessment of their overall maturity based off of both refinement and use. So I thought we might have some time. It doesn't have to be on today's call, but to try to start bringing that up on some of the agendas to go through whether or not we want to bump up any of the maturity levels on the profiles that we have. And then I listened to the recording from last profiling call on the 18th, and there's been a couple kind of tangential conversations around reslicing. What I heard from the recording was like, basically there's still kind of evaluating some of the challenges with reslicing that we've seen pop up in the community when trying to profile on an established CA baseline slice for identifier. But the goal being before saying, okay, we'll throw the baby out with the bathwater and remove slicing in these spaces would be to like discuss the actual kind of benefits that we get one way or the other, compared to some of the other mechanisms that are available to us. And then I think I heard like a collection of scenarios where we think slicing and reslicing are most likely to occur. For folks that were on that 18th call, did that sound like the next steps that you remember on this topic?
I don't remember next steps, but I do remember us thinking we should come back to it.
Okay. So we'll do a little more freeform on that one when we get to it. And then again, this is more of a reach goal. We have a number of things that I think are ready to be applied that we've made some motions towards that we might just use some time on the call if we have it to actually go and make those changes and push the commits in. Is there anything that folks would want to see prioritized in the agenda that they're not seeing here? All right, then I think we'll kick it off with the return to stub value sets. I won't, basically, the slides are there, they're available. We talked through like how we tested it on the last governance, on the second to last profiling call. But effectively where we arrived was there is an improvement in the way that stub value sets could be modeled that allows for the validators that are actually like utilizing that structure to retrieve either retrieve the definition of that value set, whether or not it's pointing to another value set that exists elsewhere or a combination of value sets, or it's enumerated within the value set itself. And we tested, like, I think in terms of goals that we had for what sub-value sets accomplish for us as somebody who often points to content in the terminology space that's hosted by other people, was to find a structure that could be evaluated by the validator if those value sets were resolvable, and provided a bit of like a human landing ground for seeing some of the, like, essentially the description of the value sets themselves, in case the host of the value sets, like the terminology servers that host the value sets, don't have that human landing place that describes, okay, this is a exchange value set from SNOMED CTCA, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we did some both positive and negative testing to make sure that, like, if everything is in place from an infrastructure perspective, the new structure is capable of having validation results and confirm that that is the case. And where we left off, because we were originally evaluating like effectively like 3 different flavors, was that we really liked the one that we had positive tests in, but that before we came to a conclusion of, yes, let's apply this right now or ahead of the 2.0 release, we wanted to make sure we knew what the impact would be, and could talk through like how versioning would be applied on top of this, and if making this move would make a difference one way or the other on that impact. And so, Elliot, I know when we just started the call, you were saying didn't have a ton of time to kind of test it out, but like, are there specific things that we can talk through that would get this group to a place where we'd be confident saying, yep, regardless, we think this is the right path forward. It's better than what we have. Let's apply it.
Well, I think I am at that point anyhow. I think it is the way we should be going. I had just hoped to have a chance to play with it and see what happens when value set versions change and some other things around that. Just in order to have that understanding, but I still think it's probably the best way for us to go anyhow.
And in relation to versioning, like, are we, let me actually find it. Hold on, it's going to be in this one. Let me find the one that we modeled out. Was the idea that we wanted to know like what would happen and whether or not we should put like an actual version in the definition of the value set, or what would happen if this was pointing to a value set that existed on a terminology server that like was refreshed every 6 months?
Yeah, those are the questions that I wanted a chance to look at.
From a baseline perspective, I know that we've looked at versioning value sets, like versioning our bindings to particular value sets in the past, and we moved away from it. Because particularly a number of the value sets that we point to are specifically SNOMED CTCA value sets, which do refresh on a pretty regular standpoint.
Yeah.
Do we need to, like, are there reasons why we would consider basically like lock dating a certain value set from a baseline perspective, not from another type of profile, but for the baseline in particular, to say, hey, we think you should continue utilizing this value set as it's been defined?
Well, there's a difference between versioning the value set itself and having the value set version, logical definition version to a specific snapshot of how that logical definition is expanded. Right? So let me see if I can so there's a difference between saying we've got value set versioned, I'm just gonna use numbers rather than dates, version 1, and then we've updated that references all SNOMED concepts under the findings hierarchy, just as an example, right? And then we've got value set version 2 that includes all SNOMED concepts under the findings hierarchy plus the specific code from somewhere else. And so that's a different version of what we call the same value set. We have a new definition of that value set. Then there's we have a value set that wants to reference everything under the SNOMED findings hierarchy as it exists whenever you expand it, or a value set that says I want to use everything under the findings hierarchy as it existed in the version X of SNOMED itself, so you're not getting changes in that expansion. So there's a bunch of different axes in which something can be versioned here, right? And we need to be careful about which one we're talking about.
So let me see that versioning in the post value set, i.e. like SCTCA Jan 2023 release. And then there was a third one, right?
Yeah, well, there's versioning in the expansions, and then there's versioning of the definition of the value set.
And then the ones that are in our control, that have the possibility of being in our control, are effectively this. And I'm curious to explore this more, but is it this as well? Versioning, like how things get expanded? Like when we have this structure that we've been talking about of this value set, that translates to the things that we actually have potential control over being in this space and in this space. Right? If the baseline had a baseline value set that combined and absent unknown. Because my thinking is what we're referring to is, let's see, it's specifically what we have to control here. And if it was, give me this version of role class nurse that's defined in by some other party and hosted in THO, that's what is determining like what gets enumerated and cached for the expectations, right?
Should be, yes.
And so the hypothesis that I would put forward as somebody who's, yeah, go ahead.
Actually, this is a little more complex because it is, our value set is an expansion of another value set, which could be also intentionally defined and therefore could version its contents.
Using this structure.
Yeah.
Yep. So I think my question is, if we think that the powers, like whoever the authority is for this value set, is the direction and the value set that we want to utilize and encourage the use of and proliferate the use of, because it's consistently being used in systems today, that we wouldn't have a reason for saying at this point in time, we're only trying to get people to align to 1.0.0. Because what we're effectively said is, we think that this is a right match for the scope of what folks are utilizing for this field. And that might have to be maintained over time. It's likely going to have to be maintained over time. So unless we have a reason, I think, for basically stale dating it, I don't know if in a baseline we would want to version out how things get enumerated.
Yeah, I think most of the time, particularly when we're dealing like with value sets like SNOMED, CT, etc., we want to, we're looking for it to expand to the current version of the code system that the value set is referencing. There's probably a very few times, and it might be when we start talking about particularly HL7 value sets that are structural, where we want a specific version because we need that specific list of code sets because our logic depends on it, right? And those likely would be things that show up in required bindings and things. I don't think they're generally the majority of our value sets. It's just like if we think back to CDA, most things were bound dynamically so that they went to the current version, and a very few things were bound statically because you needed specifically those values.
So what's an example where, you know, we have a binding that's pointed to HL7 terminology that if we didn't specify a version, would run into trouble with? Is it all around like the fact that now all of the terminology is supposed to work across a bunch of different FHIR versions? And sometimes it doesn't.
Well, and there's also potentially working across FHIR and non-FHIR terminologies too, depending.
So what would be like, is there a scenario that people have come across where they are pointing towards something and something bad happens because from a HL7 or non-FHIR terminology perspective, they didn't version it? They didn't version their binding, or they didn't version the value set that they applied in their binding.
They didn't reference a versioned expansion, you mean, or didn't version the value set?
Didn't reference a versioned expansion.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen that use case here yet, personally, but others might have.
And if we haven't come across it in our own implementations and we haven't come across it in the baseline, do we have to worry about it in the baseline at this time?
I don't necessarily think so, but now version value sets, that's a whole different thing. I think that we have to worry about when we change the definition of our value set.
To make it like a combination value set, you mean?
Yes,
or make
or
it
we adjust,
or
we adjust the logical definition of what's included somehow, right? Or the other example is we had a value set that has this list of codes plus the asked but not answered and unknown codes and things, and then those things got moved into the value set we're referencing and things got recombined. So then we end up reversioning our value set to handle the updated definitions, right? Those things have happened.
I think dealing with different expansions is an issue for generally an issue for actual implementations. And less of an issue for profilers. So it's very possible that challenges around this have come up, but that we may not be aware of them.
Yes, certainly the value set definitions of like IPS internationally moved around in some of their species how they handled the unknowns relative to the other pieces. So that kind of stuff has come up.
So are we worried enough about what we don't know that we can't make a change? Or like, can we fall back on the principle where it's like, well, we've reasonably thought through the majority of how we think this is going to be used, and we're open to modifying our approach and applying versioning in the future to our, essentially the definition in our of what value sets we're targeting, if we hear from implementers that they're hitting challenges because of the lack of it.
Yeah, I think I'm reasonably comfortable going ahead.
Yeah.
Is anyone uncomfortable with that? Okay, I'm gonna make
I
another.
just think to clarify my understanding from Edit and Lauren's talk, and I think what you both said is they keep this wording or keep this coupling of the terminology side with this FHIR baseline body as loose as possible. That's my understanding on what I heard. Is that right?
I think maybe from the baseline perspective, yes, unless we were to hear that a decision we made it more challenging to other people.
Yes, and based on what I call the lesson learned specific, still there, the patient, the agenda, the required binding, and which has been a little bit loose in the R5, R6, maybe R6 as well, and by expanding plus unknown there. So, and also from another side of my observation is that's a terminology domain and not really specific, the core of the FHIR standard. So, and also the third, I heard in I observed in the Zulu before. I said they said maybe not original word. There's such a diversification or diversified health sector. There's quite different business requirements, and it cannot be perceivable at events in the manner. May we see keep this how to say this coupling of those terminology thing as loose as possible. And in other words, in this specific case, may just give a URI and without any warning, and to rely on the actual implementers to decide which version they prefer, either the original version, a new version, or there's expansion, whatever they would like to put inside.
Does anyone want to turn that into a motion? And I think it's probably a two-part one. I think one is the first part, and we can separate these as distinct motions if we want. But I think the first part is we think that we should move forward with this change in our approach to use the compose include value set instead of the way that we've been doing it. And then the second part would be we think that we should or should not utilize versioning as part of that modeling at this point in time.
Yeah, I just want to share some analogy here, maybe something. I like this way to do the to illustrate it matter. If I go to buy a car, and definitely I can have multiple choices about what kind of wheel on this car, and now wording might constrain my options here, and may just say you can only pick up 17 inches tire, and even the car can fit in 20, 21 inches tire. That's my give it this kind of analogy for your information.
Yeah, and I'm not hearing anybody that's saying like, no, we really should be doing this. So for us to make the change, someone does have to make a motion. Does anyone want to put forward like as a first motioner?
So I will move that we transition over to stub value sets that reference an unversioned that reference an unversioned canonical of the base. I don't. That's not the right word.
Is it target?
Yeah,
I don't know.
sure. Target code system or value set. Yeah.
I think it's value set, right?
Not necessarily. I mean,
Because the value set itself references concepts from a code system, right? And so we're talking about when we're creating a value set, we're creating an identified set of concepts from a given code system, which is why the code system is what's in the actual instance and not the value set in the instance, right?
Yes, yeah.
I'm not sure. Is it a canonical identifier or canonical URI?
Not necessarily. If there's a
Well,
canonical URI that identifies the value set, yes.
yeah, we're talking about the most specific here. If we were more, land on a concrete profiling thing,
yeah, I'm fine with saying canonical URI.
Sure.
or maybe identifier. That's what being used in the FHIR, more popular now instead of canonical, sorry, URI. Sometimes they're also using a canonical identifier right now. I don't know which one they prefer right now.
I think it's URI would be preferred if we're trying to be precise, but
Mhm.
Were you comfortable with the change that I think it was says that reference? And I think what you were meaning is like change this over to sub value set, change over sub value sets to reference, right? Did that change the intent?
so remove the 2 as the fourth word on the line.
Okay. Is this what you're happy with? Do you want to add to it, change anything before we ask for seconder?
I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Is there a seconder for the motion?
Again, second.
Okay. Do we feel that we need any further discussion on the topic? Is there anyone that wants to abstain from a vote? Is there anyone that wants to vote negative on it? All right, I think that's 0800. All right. So motion passes. We can make the change. We can make it really at any point in time, ahead of the 1.2, or hold off on it for the 1.2 and change it in 2.0. Do folks have a preference? Or change it as part of 2.0? No
I
matter
can see
what,
arguments for both
Yeah.
timing.
if we put it in for 1.2, because we have to make a canonical change of our domain to prepare for 2.0, which is our biggest change, we will have to obviously change them once again. So because they're now going to carry over the baseline canonical, even though previously it was, I'll pull up our example. It was this. If we make the change now, we'll have to change it twice. First to use the new structure, second to use the new canonical. I don't know if that changes people's opinions on it.
I don't think we need to change. I don't think we need to change it to change the new structure. Do
So
we?
by 2.0, we will no longer use this,
Correct.
but we could essentially temporarily apply the new structure. And then when we move to 2.0, make everything have this new URL.
But what do we need to change with our value set URLs related to making this change?
Well, right now the stubs are, oh, hold on. This is one, here's an example. Let me see if I can find prescription drug form. Oh, actually, a lot of these we won't have to. Okay, so here's one that like,
Yeah.
this one would be like a proper stub in the sense where we are basically hosting, this is the value set at the info route canonical, as opposed to some of these which already have our baseline canonical on it. So I guess maybe it'd be a mixture. There might be some if we're saying, hey, this is a sub value set that don't have this canonical yet, but that would.
Sorry, it's just, my memory cannot remember both the current and the newer URL. Can you put these two together? The two URL, which is the current one, which is
The one
will
be
be changed.
to. Let me see if I
Yeah,
have it.
thank you.
I know it's ho7canada.ca something, but it's probably in the bowels of my slides. Let's see.
I think it's hl7canada.ca/ig/baseline.
Seven. Let's see here. This one? Oh, wait, no, hold on. I know we've got a forum post out on it.
Because
It's the
been
same.
wow, I cannot remember. What I recall is we just changed the host root component, which has been constrained under the governance structure of HR7 International, and then keep the rest path and other components as what it is.
So basically everything up to the IG identity is the thing that's changing.
Well, that will be a very significant change.
Well, no, sorry. The name of the artifacts, that component isn't changing, but like the root of this does have to change. Because we can't publish to hl7.org.
Yeah, just hl7.org. Yeah, that's what I call it. Sorry, even without HTTP, that part, that's called a root of the URL. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks.
it is a significant change, but we discussed for a while that we have to make it, and we've been preparing for it.
Well, I think what Thomas is saying is changing more than just the domain.
Yep.
Makes it more significant
Yep.
than just a change of domain.
That's true.
That will have a more significant impact because people rely on the path, try to identify the path is, is a category way to handle different file resource type.
So for what we're referring to, and we'll do that comparison side by side. So if making change now, some value sets. After, as part of 2.0. will change to let's just get one of these examples up. Okay, so this is one. This is what it would be after 2.0, and if we made the change now, it will be temporarily. Where's our other one?
You missed the H, but yeah.
Does that make sense?
That will be a big announcement.
For the 2.0, absolutely.
That's totally break change.
Yeah, but we know, like, we've known for a year and a half, and we've been communicating that it's gonna happen, it has to happen, and we have no other choice.
Yeah, because it's not a route anymore. It's
Yeah.
path as well.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
will
I
these-
don't
these
know that I feel
chronicles-
the change of path makes it a bigger impact than just changing the domain. I think any change to the canonicals is a big change, and it's going to be painful to our community, but unfortunately we have to do it. I don't know that leaving everything beyond the domain the same makes it any smaller of a change in terms of the impact.
I don't think it makes it any smaller. I do know, for instance, the BC Registries development team has been tracking this, and they know it's coming, and they see it as a change they're going to have to make, but they don't see it as a huge impact change. It will be a non-trivial, but it's not massive.
Yeah, if they really implement it in the right way.
Well,
I call it cascade way. That will be the best practice through this coding process.
yeah, so in terms of their coding, they don't expect it to be a huge deal, but it's just it's something that has to be done and tested and get through all the testing systems, right? So it's not trivial, but they've been preparing for it since we started talking about this. So
Will we also work with Infoway and the terminology gateway, terminology server, so that they're using the same canonicals?
So they're not using these canonicals. These are the canonicals for our stubs, but we do need to work with them to figure out what is the canonical, what will be the new canonical for this because of it living on the terminology server that we have to point to.
Okay.
I don't think that needs to change.
But I don't think, and this, I mean, we've got Anil and Tarek and others on the call. I think that the canonicals are changing that are going to go live on the terminology server, right?
In the initial phase, they're being redirected. I think they're not changing. We're trying not to change them.
Okay.
So just keep in mind, this is following this URI just following another governance structure outside baseline community can manage and control.
So effectively, like when we would anticipate to publish 2.0, we don't have to like, these will be redirected. Like we don't have to worry about, effectively, if we were to write our value sets this way and the validator went to try to find the value set to perform that, call, we wouldn't have to worry about this preventing that from happening because of redirection.
That's the
Correct.
thought. Yeah, that's the thought. Yeah.
Cool, okay. So at least from a 2.0 perspective, we don't have to worry about, like, from anything that's listed on the PanCan terminology server, that having to be modified. But if there were other things like that live elsewhere that have since changed, we'll just have to ensure that that's part of the definition. But I think
And
that
the nice thing about having our value sets point to the InfoA ones is that if InfoA were to change, you could still refer to our value sets and we would just redirect elsewhere within our value sets.
yeah.
Hmm.
The current. Ever isn't the case. The new structure gives us less fragility.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so does that change our opinion? I mean, basically, are folks tripping rearing? I mean, we can make this change now and just update everything together when we go to 2.0.
I'm tempted to hold off and not introduce another change in one, just in order to let's keep things moving towards two.
Anyone feel differently?
And make extra not quite relevant. Any other pan-Canadian fire profiling relevant project may also would like to follow this route as well.
What do you, can you expand on there?
Something like CA Core is being developed by InfoA and CaiHi, and so without further discussion, I would say no, they shouldn't be using the HL7 Canada route unless there's some idea of turning it over to HL7 Canada for stewardship.
And at which point, if they decide to ballot it under HL7 Canada as a balloted HL7 Canada artifact.
Yes, that's said.
But
Lauren
that's
mentioned
not happening yet.
I mean, this HL7 Canada.ca is under the HL7 Canada governance structure. In that manner, it should be more, I call it the canonical or official URL route for any file relevant IG project if we really want to be under the governance structure of HL7 Canada and also being, how to say, compliant or being certified in that manner. That's
Yes.
what I take away, right?
Well, yes, and I think to say what you said another way, the specifications that become balloted through HL7 Canada and have the HL7, like the affiliate has the authority to say this is an HL7 specification. The things that go through that route where the affiliate has said, yes, this is the Canadian FHIR specification for X, those things should be under the HL7 Canada canonical URL. But things that don't do that and haven't done that shouldn't be. And I think that's what Elliot was saying.
Yeah. And and specifically with relation to these value sets, HL7 Canada baseline is not the source of truth for the practitioner specialty value set. We're simply hosting it at our canonical because it's a stub structure.
Well, and I don't know that we need to be the source of truth for the content,
Yeah.
but we are the source of truth for the value set definition that says this is what we're using.
But like, let's say in core, if practitioner specialty is being used, it's more likely that they're going to point directly to the canonical on the Pan-Canadian terminology where it lives.
Yes.
Yeah. Without having to have a pass-through structure. Or let's say it's a core developed value set might be actually a better description, because it's like, this is the source of truth that was developed through this implementation guide. So I don't know if that's what you were asking, Thomas, but I think we're not necessarily encouraging, like, if there is a more direct source and a way of targeting this information, I don't know if we have to tell people we'll use the baseline value set for doing that, because we're using it for perfunctory reasons, not necessarily definitional ones at this point.
Okay. I guess this called stub value set canonical more like how to see the another canonical domain, canonical URL in the baseline domain. That's my takeaway, which is given another InfoWay URL, which could be actually be dereferenced to pursue to access the real value set in that specific service endpoint.
Yeah, like at the actual server source.
Yeah, thank you. That's good. Really, that's very good setting. Thanks.
So just circling back. So Elliot, I think you said like you're in favor of not putting it in 1.2 and just waiting to get the like both the total change of what needs to be done into 2.0. Does anyone feel differently?
If from 1 to 2, it can afford or can take this break change into consideration.
Well, I think 1.2 is supposed to be like, here, I actually have it written up. So breaking change like fixes to some of the profiles, like things that actually prevent the profiles from operating the way the profiles are supposed to, is like target 1.2. But updates to overall new canonical, larger improvements in the like maturity assessment is what we've scoped for 2.0. So I think if nobody's pushing for it to be in 1.2, 2.0 seems like the logical place. That way we don't have to change it twice. People don't just consume this one and then have to make an update 4 more months down the line. I'm hoping it's 4 months or less. Is anyone uncomfortable with me saying, sorry, 2.0? All right. Then I think we will save the change until that point because it's a more substantial update. Okay. We have 5 minutes left, but my number one goal, we have met it in making a decision towards the modeling. Next, profiling. This just keeps returning as a topic, I think, for folks. Like, is this how you meaningfully want to address this question of like, do we keep reslicing, or do we keep slicing on identifier, or do we stop slicing on identifier? Are these the questions we want to be discussing as a profiling community?
guessing from the
It-
fact that it came back up that we kind of need to make a statement of how we perceive this should be done as a best practice kind of thing.
Specifically how, like, if slicing should be applied in the base, or how you might reslice things that have already been sliced in the base.
Well, covering both of those really. Because
I
I think it's coming back because people aren't understanding why we made certain changes. And they think slicing's the way to do it. And we just took it out because of the issues it caused. Or in the places where we've left it in, it doesn't cause those issues.
Elliot, you were saying something? Was that?
Well, yeah, I think we should come back and I don't think reslicing should be causing the problems that people are reporting.
Mm.
So I'd like to revisit it and see, yes, this is why it's happening. And therefore, either here's how you can avoid it causing a problem, or here's how we need to change things so that it won't be a problem. And that might mean removing the slicing, but it could be, other solutions.
Yeah, I think if we just go directly to removing the slicing, then that creates other problems within the inability for us to express what we're trying to express. So I think looking at figuring out how to manage this effectively is the right choice, as opposed to just going to let's stop doing this.
Yep, I think we just, once we've made this choice and figured out how to do it, we really need to make sure that strategy is available so it doesn't keep getting brought up by every time somebody new comes along and that hasn't heard the discussion.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So the way that we get at this is I know Pier, like we had provided some early troubleshooting to Piers when he brought up the what he was seeing in sushi. Like, is it, we ask whether or not have Pierce join us and just say like, hey, did that resolution end up working for you? Were you still getting errors? Like, is it asking others in the community to come forward? Like, how do we get at this? So I think right now, Piers and Lorraine, you've mentioned that it's occurred for you folks.
Well, no, right now we're not creating any specific, we don't have any specific challenges right now. And the project Pierce was on made the call to break the connection with the baseline and move forward because they were under a time crunch. So it may be a priority midterm in that they've created some technical debt, but I don't think it's blocking them right now.
But they are like a party that's been affected that like would be able to tell us whether or not the origin of the problem was actually the baseline.
Yeah. But that's as far as I know to speak. So that's just from what he said in the call. I can't speak for him beyond that, obviously.
Sheridan, perhaps could we reach out to Piers between now and the next profiling call and see if we can get a better description of the issue he's running into, and perhaps spend some time trying to track it down and solve it, and then we can come back and work through it on the call.
Yes, I think that we can pen that up. I don't know if I will put the email through. And then I know in the call we had suggested looking at, there was another profile that operated very similar that had to reslice. So hopefully he's had a chance to apply that change, but good point in that we shouldn't just kind of wait for the next one that he's on. Okay, so then with intention of okay, and then if it turns out, hey, that's resolved, then we put the issue to bed. Ideally, maybe
Mhm.
with some documentation. Okay. All right, I will save it here then. All right, and I think that brings us to time. So this will be one of our major topics for the next session, depending on how far we can get with troubleshooting in the meantime. And then we will probably return to, I've got to get some time in the next agenda to get some of these things actually applied on call. So in order for us to progress to 1.2 and actually get some of these in. Otherwise, I will see many of you folks at the next governance call next Friday.
Sheridan, can you hold on for a second?
Yes. Here, let me just I'll stop the recording and get these uploaded to YouTube.